everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm really excited to talk about something I haven't talked about in a while, and that's investing in real estate with a partner. And there's many reasons to do that, but when you have a partner, no matter how well you know them, if they're your I don't, okay, so I partner with my husband, right? So we don't have a formal JV agreement. Well, we're married, and so we're kind of covered that way, right? So we already have that legal. But it's always a good idea to put everything in writing. So what I'm going to be doing today is kind of going through the reasons, common problems that I've seen, and what you should include in your joint venture agreement. So there's many reasons to partner in real estate investing. So you might be new to investing, and this is a great way for you to learn about a flip or rehab project or how to wholesale or, there's different forms of partnering. Like you could have a marketing partnership where you're splitting the cost or the duties of marketing. You could have a partnership that where you're actually purchasing a property and you have plans to Airbnb it, you have plans to flip it. So there's all different kinds of ways. So what I'm trying to educate you today about when you get into a partnership, regardless if it's just for marketing and there's money involved, it's always a good idea to put it in writing. As I said, it's a great way for hands-on learning. So if you're brand new to real estate, or maybe you've been doing some, wholesaling, but you've never done a flip, or, maybe you want to buy a rental with someone and you don't know anything about getting tenants. So there's all kinds of ways that you can have a partnership. Maybe you are extraordinaire at finding great deals, but you're short on cash. So you need some money partners, right? You need to find private money lenders or that you can partner with. And so there's a lot of, I actually do another YouTube video about, finding folks with a self-directed IRA, and, they can be passive investors. So it's a type of partnership. Maybe you're doing all the work on the property, but they're providing the money, and there's all kinds of ways you could structure that. You could just pay them, points and interest for a period of time. You could, if they're lending the money, and maybe you're going to give them part of the equity if you're going to, when you sell the property. And so maybe you're just not experienced enough on rehabs. Maybe you've done like the paint and carpet, but now you have a property that needs a total gut, complete remodel down to the studs. Or if you've found a burnout house, those are a little tricky, and there's a lot of details that go into rehabbing a burnout house. And so maybe you don't have that experience, so you could partner with somebody that does have that experience, and then you can learn. So maybe you're not making 100% of the profits, but the education that you're getting by partnering is far worth it. You just want more deals. I do a lot of partnerships where we're, on marketing cost, splitting up the workload, so if, who's going to take the calls. So maybe I'll pay for the marketing, but somebody else will take all the calls. Maybe we, split the workload 50-50. So there's all kinds of ways. It's not just about purchasing the property. And when you partner, you actually, that enables you to have multiple projects going on. You're just not a one-man show. You've got kind of other people with you. So you can actually handle more projects and more deals. So those are some really good reasons to partner with people. Now, when you do partner, you should have a joint venture agreement. That's what I call it. That's what I've used in the past. So joint venture agreement. And really, you could have an attorney prepare this for you. What I've done is I've created my own joint venture agreement by, looking at other ones on the internet. Other people have maybe shared with them, and I do have an example. So you can always email me, Nancy@kbnhomes.com. Be happy to send you my example of my joint venture agreement. So these are some of what I call the elements, what needs to be in the joint venture agreement. So first of all, it's parties to the agreement, who is the contact person. So for example, I buy all my properties or get them under contract in a certain LLC. So that LLC, I'm the managing member. So the joint venture agreement would actually list my LLC and then myself as the managing member, with all my contact info. So if you don't have an LLC, that doesn't mean that you can't still be a party to the contract. So you just put in who really, who is the agreement between. It's going to be the financial responsibility, or who is responsible for what. You want to include the scope of work, and you want to define not only what the scope of work is, but who is going to do the work, who's going to manage it, who's going to oversee it. I'm sorry about that. So, and you want to have a purpose, like why are you even having a joint venture agreement? So you should spell out, why you're even creating this joint venture agreement, what the end result is of the joint venture agreement, and then the money. So let's say you're bringing in a money partner and they're doing 100%. So you need to have all of that listed, how they're going to get their money back. Are they going to be in first lien position? What's the paperwork going to look like? Because they need to have the deed of trust in whoever's, doing the money. And so, or if you're doing 50-50, who, it could be 50-50. I mean, I've had partnerships where I've been a private money lender and we've had multiple people. So I've found percentages work really well. So you just do it by percentage, always round up, round down, round up, and put that in writing, who has responsibility and what percentage, of the money. And then contractor decisions. So if you're newer, maybe you don't have all the contacts that the person that you're partnering with, they're very experienced. Maybe they have their own crew, they have their own contact people. But let's say you're both seasoned investors. So how are you going to decide who's going to do the foundation, who's going to do the plumbing? How are you going to determine? Now, it probably usually boils down to the quality of work and the cost and things like that. But how are you going to make those decisions? And then, this is something that is rarely talked about, but personalities play a huge part in successful partnerships. So, you have to think about who, this is a person that you're basically going to be in business day to day for the next, could be short, 3 months, could be a year. If you buy, I've worked with people that purchased Airbnbs, and so they're partners on an Airbnb. So they have some skin in the game. They're going to be together as a partner for a long time. So sometimes our personalities can get in the way of business. So if you both come to the table with this is business, sometimes you have to have a little thick skin, and when it comes to money and people, especially if you're not related, or sometimes it can be worse when you're related, but there can be friction. So what's the personality of the person? Like if I'm a very organized person, so my personality probably doesn't lend to somebody that is so laid back. It's like, okay, what gets done whenever. Or you might be a very detail oriented person, but the person that you're partnering with, not so much. And so you can see how when you're working, especially if you're doing a flip, you're trying to run think of it as a mini business, right? And you're coming together and you have to make all kinds of decisions. So I want you to really think about how, if you have a document like a really strong joint venture agreement, then you can allay a lot of those fears, a lot of those problems by just, sitting down, having a discussion and writing it all out, right? And then what's the timeline going to be? Like, if it's a flip, is it going to take 90 days? Is it going to take 120 days? You have to kind of figure out what is the project. So that's kind of the purpose of the joint venture agreement. What is the project? So for marketing agreements, what I've done is I'll just say, okay, because you don't want to be locked in for, 5 years. You want to make sure it's working. So what I've done is I'll enter in maybe into a 90-day or 60-day marketing joint venture agreement. And if it's working great, then we can all renew it. It's kind of like a lease. It goes month to month, or, the parties can come back together and say, you know what, we need to change this or whatever. But depending on what the project is or what the partnership is all about, you don't want to lock yourself in for years and years and years. So just kind of think about what the timeline is going to be. And then, of course, I mean, this is probably a no-brainer, but I thought I would just throw it in there. You want to get signatures from everybody that's part of the joint venture agreement. So in the first paragraph, when you talk about the parties to this agreement are blah, 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 everybody needs to sign, and you need to date that document. Now, this is just a little tip from me. So many of you know, used to do property management. And so there is a reason that the truck contract and the lease agreements all have initials at the bottom of the page. Have you ever wondered about that? It's because if for some reason you have to go to court or there comes a dispute, if you show that nobody initialed that page, then they can come back and say, well, I never read that. I never saw that. So it's just a good idea to have all partners not only sign the document, which is usually on the last page, but initial, including the first page. And then just for good measure, I put a date in there. So everybody has initialed each page. And so they're saying they agree to it, right? Because they're initialing it, they're signing it, and they're dating it. And so those are just a little bit of tip from me from prior joint venture agreements I've had. Now, once you decided that you want to have a partner, then this again might be a no-brainer for a lot of people. You might already have the person that you're going to be partnering with. You've already been doing it, but what if you start to branch out? So I said, who is my partner? Who is your partner? Because, I've done a lot of partnering and I've never run a background check on anybody because I typically work with seasoned investors or new investors that I'm coaching, right? So I kind of have a track record of their follow through and their accountability. So, but one of the things I see people forget about is, okay, you've got this joint venture agreement. If you did it correctly, you've spelled out who is going to be responsible, but really who's going to manage, who's in charge of what, who's in charge of marketing, who's in charge of hiring the contractor, who's in charge of paying, who's in charge of putting utilities in their name. How are you going to handle the insurance on the property? So from a credit check standpoint, if I had a new investor and I thought the deal was really good, I might run a credit check. And unfortunately, you will run into people who have a sketchy background. So, it's not a bad idea to find out if you don't know them or they don't have good references, or you just want to give yourself a little peace of mind, run a credit check, find out if they've had bankruptcies, if they have liens on other properties, if they have a history of non-payment, if they've had properties that go into foreclosure, because especially if you're becoming a private money lender, you really want to protect yourself and you really want to feel secure about, who this person is. I've worked with so many people that, they just didn't do this part. They just trusted that they had a great person. It's like, okay, great. So I just am saying, do your due diligence. You want to find out if they have any money, especially if they're supposed to be putting in 50%, and what their liquidity is like, so are they, tied up with a lot of other properties? So you're always thinking, worst case scenario, what happens if, the market shifts and you can't sell the property? What if the contractor that you just paid $20,000 doesn't finish the work? What if you can't get the permit for 9 months? So those are some things that you have to think about as to, who you're in business with. Remember, I talked about the timeline. So is this somebody you want to be in business with for 60 days, 90 days, 12 months? So you kind of have to think about all that ahead of time. And then the next thing I look at is experience level. So I am a private money lender and I will get contacts from people and they're brand new to investing. I'll have them send me the deal. I'll, analyze the deal and it won't be a deal. They're new investors. So obviously, that's not a person I want to partner or lend money to. However, I have worked with new investors. They have a good deal, they have a solid background. But one of the things I want to know is, have they ever been in a JV relationship? I call it, JV relationship. Have they ever partnered before? Because you might have to have a discussion with them, especially if you're a seasoned investors. What does that partnership look like? What are the expectations? You have to set all that up front before money exchanges hand. You put your name on the property deed and that kind of thing. And then also realize that new investors versus seasoned usually have a longer learning curve. So you might have to step back and say, you know what, the reason that we have to get a permit for the foundation is because, the city requires it, or you have to get a plumbing test after foundation work. So you just have to make sure all your ducks are in the row. And sometimes new investors might not have all the knowledge that you have if you're seasoned. If you have new investors coming together to partner, then I'm just saying to you, you can do that all day long. But what you'll just want to do is kind of follow these steps to make sure that you're discussing and you're documenting and you're communicating what the purpose of the joint venture agreement is. And then list of contractors and who's going to do the work. So I'm a seasoned investor, so I have a plethora of contractors, the good ones and the bad ones. I know who not to call and I know who to call. So, but maybe I'm partnering with someone that's just as seasoned as I am and they have their list of contractors. So, how are you going to decide what contractor does the work? Sometimes price comes into, sometimes quality of work, but you have to kind of decide how you're going to decide on the contractor. And if you're lucky enough to have your own team of contractors, then good for you. And then also, how do you know each other? Now this is about the partnership. How do you know the person? Now, maybe this is somebody that you've known for many years. I have a ton of real estate investing friends that I would partner in a heartbeat with. I also know some people that I wouldn't partner with. So, how did you meet them? What's their track record? What are you looking to get from this? And don't forget about personalities. So if you have two people, so I'm kind of a control freak, okay. And if I have another partner that's a control freak, we're going to kind of sometimes butt heads, right? Unless we have a discussion, we write it all out, we document it about how our project is going to go. So if you are someone that happens to be a little bit more dominant and you partner with somebody who's not as dominant, they might be feeling taken advantage of, which is a very common problem in partnerships. So you kind of got to bring it all to the table to have a successful partnership, and putting it in writing is key to that. So I talked about show me the money. So if you are, let's say you're wanting to do a flip and you found the property and you don't have the cash to purchase it, or maybe you have the cash to purchase it, but you don't have the cash to do the rehab. So you're going to need a partner. So maybe you're just going to go out and have a private money lender. Maybe you're going to reach out to a seasoned investor. But how much money, and this all should be written, so I'm going to put in $100,000 to purchase the property and you're going to bring 50,000 to the deal. And then, maybe we're going to split the profits 50-50. So something like that. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but you have to kind of think about who's bringing what to the table. So let's say that, you get the property and this happens, supply chain issues, contractor issues, and the timeline is now extended. You're not going to get done in 90 days or 60 days or whatever your timeline was in the agreement, and you need more money. So how are you going to get the money? Do the partners have the money? You're going to have to go to another lender. So how are you going to, if you do need additional funds, how are you going to get them? How are you going to acquire them? And then I always recommend having a clause in the joint venture agreement. So let's say you're partnering with someone who they are a contractor, and they have all their tools and they're going to provide the labor. You should put that in a joint venture agreement. Now, I'm saying most of the time, like 99% of the time, you're not going to need this, but just on the off chance something goes wrong. So if, Miss A is providing all the tools, maybe they have access to discount sheetrock and paint and that kind of carpet and all those kinds of things. So who is responsible? Who has the ownership of the tools, the labor, and how are they going to be paid? So that's another thing. And then how are you going to share not only the profits, but the losses, right? So how are you going to break it down? I recommend doing percentages, especially when money is involved. And then what bank account will you use? So I've done partnerships. I have opened up bank accounts to do a property, done that. We've done it where, part of the funds are coming from my own business bank account, and the other partner has their bank account, and we do it that way. So there's a whole lot of ways you can do that. But again, needs to be addressed, needs to be written out. And if you are going to open up a new bank account, you got to go together, right? So you probably don't want that just in one person's name, unless that's that's what your joint venture agreement is. So again, it's all up to you. And then who's going to be responsible for the accounting, especially if you have a lot of bills for vendors and utilities and insurance? Who's going to write those checks? How is it going to get paid? So how is that going to be? And are you going to use my QuickBooks? You're going to use your QuickBooks? You're going to get new QuickBooks? Are you just going to do it on a spreadsheet? So again, discuss these things prior to um, getting involved in a partnership. Now, I like to talk about the numbers. So the two biggest things I see with partnerships is number one, personalities, because everything else I've been talking about is everything is negotiable. You can document it, you can communicate it, and really partnerships are what each person feels comfortable bringing to the table. So once I get through the personality, then the next thing are the numbers. So if you're going to go into a partnership, so let's say, you know, Kathy has a property and she wants to partner with me, right? She needs a money partner, but we decided that she's new, so she wants my experience as a to flip the home. So the first thing I'm going to find out from Kathy is, well, where did you get your numbers? How was the after repair value or the ARV determined? Who did those numbers? Let's say Kathy's not a realtor and she doesn't have access to MLS, so she doesn't have the multiple listing service where you run comps and things like that. So how did she determine that this, $500,000 property that she's buying for 200 is really a $500,000 value property? So also the holding cost. And I always tell folks, you know what, if you think you're going to flip it in 90 days, that's great, but you probably should just give yourself a little cushion, and you can always calculate out for 6 months or a year. It just depends on what type of property you're doing, where it's located, if you have to go through an inspection slash permitting process. So not only do you need to know what the cost of the rehab is and who provided those numbers, but what are the holding costs? Like, what's it going to cost per month? So with the interest on the property, whether, it's through a private money lender, whether one partner is just putting in the cash and getting no interest, who's responsible for the utilities and the, like I said, the insurance, which is super important about, who, like, what if you were to have to file a claim? Who's going to be the responsible person for filing the claim? The check's going to come, those kinds of things. So it's just good to know where the numbers came from. And again, I would put all of this in the joint venture agreement so that down the road, if there's a market shift or cost of supplies go up, that you have a contingency and you know where you started. Now let's talk about the decision-making process. So the joint venture agreement really should spell this out. It should talk about the worst case scenarios. I mean, you want everything to go good. It 99% of the time will go good, but what about that 1% where you run into some issue, some problem, and you end up in court? One partner is suing the other partner. There wasn't clear title. I mean, you name it. What could go wrong, right? Let's say you bought a property and the seller decided to do a holdover. How are you going to get them out? I mean, you could do cash for keys, but maybe you're going to have to evict them. What about accounting disputes, right? So depending on who's responsible and how you're saying, like if you're doing an Excel spreadsheet, you can, you can put it in Google Sheets and you can each put in your, info if each of you are paying separately. But what happens when there's a dispute, right? Names representative in a case of, okay, so what I'm talking about here when I say name representatives in a case of a dispute, so most partnerships I've been in is 50-50, but there does need to be a tiebreaker clause of some kind, because what if you just can't agree, and you have to make a decision, or you get into a situation where you are in court, both parties, they're equal, right? So sometimes think about it. One partner might be a 51% ownership, so that decisions that come to legal disputes, accounting disputes, you need to have some way to have a tiebreaker, either written in the joint venture agreement. But if you two can't decide, are you really going to spend money on attorneys? And I mean, you need to have something in there so that if something happens, that you're both protected. And what if one party becomes incapacitated? I mean, you never want those kinds of things to happen, but They do happen. And so what happens to the partnership if one person in the partnership can't perform? Did you write in a clause or something to address that in your joint venture agreement? Now, some common problems that I've seen, sometimes experienced, is that one partner feels they are just doing more. So this kind of goes back to personalities, right? And again, you have to have clear communication. You need to document it and really what the role of each person is in this partnership. If you have, I have a lot of partnerships where I have private money lenders. So their role is very passive. I'm making all the decisions. When I work with multiple private money lenders with a self-directed IRA, we have a joint venture agreement, kind of behind the scenes, if you will, that I am the decision maker if for some reason the property has to be sold. And I'm a real estate broker, so I'm going to list it. And the JV agreement says that, I won't charge, I won't get paid a commission for doing this. And this is kind of a fail safe, like if something goes wrong, we have to get rid of the property. What if you have a partner who wants to have permits, but you don't want to get permits? And you know that this is what I'm talking about. So sometimes when we're flipping houses, if you have to get, now some things you just can't get around, typically you're always want to get plumbing permitted, you're going to want to get a roof permitted, depending on where you live and what location the property is. But the permitting process can be expensive, it can be time consuming. So what if you have a partner that doesn't want to pull permits and doesn't want to get permits and you do? So again, a discussion to have up front. um you can head off so many problems just by having a discussion in advance. It's not all about like, okay, yes, I'm going to do this, or let's flip this house and that kind of thing. You really got to think about, again, personalities, timeline, getting it all in writing, is just so important because it will stave off problems that could happen. I'm not saying that they will. Very small percentage of partnerships fail, but they do fail, and that's a reality. And you just need to always protect each party, not just yourself, but you want to protect your partner because, again, you want to be successful. You also don't want to get the reputation of not following through or not, being a bad partner. So you don't want that. So how do you avoid the disagreements? Well, I think just sitting down, even before, talking about it, getting it all out on writing. So communication, documentation, and also be talking about worst case scenarios. We never want to think about these things, death, divorce, or just, flat out lack of money, but they happen. And what is the contingency plan if that happens? What if, you're in a car accident and you're in a coma for the next 6 months and you have a 50-50 partnership and your heirs can't really do anything? Or what if your heirs are your minor children and they can't really do anything? So again, worst case scenario, you're not thinking doom and gloom, you're just protecting each party's interest with the joint venture agreement. And then what if the market shifts? I mean, you never know. Like, the sky is falling. Who knows? Interest rates are going up. Maybe you were going to sell a house and now you can't sell it. Maybe the comps were way off, which shouldn't have happened, but sometimes it does. So what are the additional exit strategies? So for example, I've worked with people who partnered on a short-term rental. So there's a shift in that market as I'm recording that now. So their partnership is going to change because they're now going to just do long-term rental. They're still going to have a partnership, but now I recommended and work with them to create a joint venture agreement for the management of a long-term rental. Maybe you were going to flip the house, but now, it didn't sell and you're going to do owner finance. So what is the exit strategy? You should always have at least two, but talk about it with your partner prior and put it in the joint venture agreement. Now, all joint venture agreements should come to an end at some time. Usually that's when the project is over. So what is the termination release of both properties? Again, the joint venture agreement should say this. After we've, completed all of the rehab and we've listed the house, we're going to sell it, split the profits, and that ends the joint venture agreement, right? So neither party is responsible anymore. Again, I go back to the death, incapacitation, bankruptcy. So maybe you have a clause in there whereby if the death of one party by chance, maybe you can buy the other, partnerships heirs out or something. I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving you legal advice here. I'm just saying, I mean, you could have an attorney, do this, but I'm just saying, what if, what if, what if? Um, and do include the termination provision in agreement. Like, just what if y'all just don't get along, you know? You just want to end the JV agreement, or you feel duped, and you want out. So what does that look like? Um, Again, usually the end of the JV agreement is, you've completed the agreement, or you have completed the project, thank you. And now the disbursement of funds to partners is all that's left. And that's, there could be insurance, but how are you going to handle defects or fines? Let's say you get a fine from the city for, I don't know, trash, or, there's a lien put on because somebody didn't pay a contractor. So what are you going to do about all that? And how is that going to affect your business? So I know this is a lot. And so the main thing is to, have an honest communication. What is each party bringing to the table? Is it money? Is it experience? Is it the deal? And then how and what way is a fair, equitable division of the profits? If you do a long-term project, so let's talk about that Airbnb or the short-term rental, switching over to a long-term rental. So how's rent going to be collected and how's it going to be dispersed? So are you going to have one bank account and it's just going to go in there and then the profits are going to be split after expenses? So just think about all of those things, how you're going to handle that. I want to really thank you guys for taking the time to watch my video. And please follow me and give me a like. I really appreciate your support. I'm trying to grow my subscribers. And if you thought this was beneficial and somebody could do it, please share it for me. So I also want to invite you to join my real estate community. And if you're interested in that, go to my website, nancywallacelobs.com, or shoot me an email at nancy@kbnhomes.com. I really want to have a group of like-minded folks that want to talk about all kinds of different exit strategies, tools, resources, and networking. And so I have launched the real estate community, and I'm just inviting you to come with me and continue your journey of real estate investing. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.